Welcome back from break. I hope you had some good conversations. It's my pleasure now to introduce this group that drove all the way from Two Harbors early this morning. I think folks were up at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. 3:30. So 3:30. Okay. Yep. And last time you were on the schedule, and of course we canceled the meeting. That would have been a doozy for you to drive down then, but then almost a repeat of the weather. Anyway, I am so excited about this group. These folks are very engaged in their community in Two Harbors, and if you don't know where Two Harbors is, it's about 160 miles up the North Shore. I first met Marlis and Sue. They were two women up the North Shore, sort of average citizens, who became aware of human trafficking and decided to take matters into their own hands, I think. Yay! They just really got engaged in the issue, started educating themselves and educating folks in Two Harbors, and that includes, you know, and I say educated, sharing what they know. I was about to say educating law enforcement. Law enforcement certainly knows about this as well, and so do all sorts of folks, but they were really diving into the issue and sharing more and more information with folks in their community, again, elected officials, law enforcement, businesses. I know that Sue walks into businesses in Two Harbors and they say, Sue, come over here, I want to write a check. Oh, wow. So they've been working really, really hard. And so I just want I'll let Sue introduce everyone on the panel, and let's give them a warm welcome.
Thank you. It's really fun to be here, finally. I was going to have to bow out of the last meeting, so actually I was glad that it was canceled. I hate to say that. But we're going to be sitting because we're going to do this conversationally. And so I'm going to have the rest of this panel stand just to introduce all of you. I'm Sue Hilliard. I'm one of the co-founders. Marlis Wish is the other co-founder, and she's going to tell us, or tell you a little more about how we got started. On the end over here is Rich Spey. He is a county board commissioner. He is my commissioner, and I'm very proud of that. He is also the chair, and he's also on lots of other state things. He's moving up. And you can stand up, Rich. You don't have to sit while you're introduced.
Now you got to look at me now.
And on this end is Ken Anderson. He's our assistant. Stand up, please. Okay, yes. He's our assistant chief of police. Our police chief is not feeling so well today. He was going to come along as a guest and sit with all of you. But we're going to sit. Like I said, this is going to be conversational. I'm thinking, okay, when Amy asked me to do this, she's asking us to come and toot our own horn. And we're going to do that because we are volunteers, and you guys are all professionals of some sort, but you know people who could be us in your own communities. So we're going to share our story about how we came to be and what we do, some of the things we have to do, and some of the fun we have. And hopefully you can take those ideas home and share them with people in your own communities and get some volunteer organizations happening there. Marlis, it's all yours.
I'm going to tell you how it started. Well, I went to a panel, excuse me, a panel discussion back in about 2010 or 2011, put on by the League of Women Voters chapter in the Duluth area. I'm a member of that. Sunu was part of the panel for that. Sunu Shrestha, if I pronounce your last name correctly. Anyhow, it was an explanation about what sex trafficking was, and I had not done any thinking about it at all up to that point. And I went to that presentation, thought it was interesting, put it all on the back burner, and then there was another panel discussion, and Sunu moderated that one, but it was Pav's a local attorney who worked on it, a local police detective in Duluth, and even a mother whose daughter had ended up being trafficked was part of the panel. And Sue and I went to that, and when we were listening to what was going on and getting more of an explanation, we looked at each other and we said, I bet you this is going on in Lake County, which is Two Harbors, Beaver Bay, Silver Bay, Fall Lake area. It's the whole county that we go visiting and educating. Anyway, so on the way home then, I was driving. By the time we got to my house, which was about a half-an-hour drive, we had a game plan. We decided what we needed to do is find out the level of education already or knowledge of what sex trafficking was in the Lake County area. And so we set up and made appointments right away with our local law enforcement, the county commissioners, county attorney, the school district officials, mayors of the 3 cities, the police department in Two Harbors and Silver Bay, church groups, anyone who we could set up an appointment with for about the next 6 months or so. That's what we did. And we found out that everybody knew a little bit about what trafficking was, but nobody had a lot of knowledge about it. So then we set out the game plan of developing, going forward with our plan of then developing a plan to how to educate the common everyday citizen of Lake County about what trafficking was. So we developed our mission statement, and it says, Lake County Sex Trafficking Task Force is dedicated to reaching out to all individuals, businesses, and organizations in Lake County, Minnesota to raise awareness, educate, and engage the entire community in the effort to keep our county free from the use of individuals for the purpose of commercial sex, and to advocate for victims who need services provided by the Minnesota Safe Harbor No Wrong Door Initiative. Now with the report we had today, we might have to tweak this a little bit, not include some more information and maybe some different language, but anyhow, I enjoyed the report. I'm going to copy it out and read it thoroughly. But that was our game plan, and then we set up and started getting presentations and stuff going. But I'm going to turn it back to Sue, because the first thing we did was get a billboard, our first one.
Marlis has mentioned Sunu a couple of times, and she called and said, we've put together an idea for a billboard, and we wonder if there's anyone in Lake County who could come up with the money to put one up, and if you can find a sign in the county. Well, we thought, what a great idea, but where are we going to get any money? There was Marlis and me, and by that point we had a third person who was interested in joining with us. Well, we put on our big girl panties and we went off to the county, or to the county board, to see if they would be interested. And let me tell you, we were nervous as heck when we walked in there. And we were on the agenda, and so when they called on us to speak, we started talking about sex trafficking and what we knew about it, and they're all shaking their heads. And we said we would like to have $800 to put up a billboard, and you know what? They're still shaking their heads. And
up and down, not
nodding.
sideways.
They're up and down. Yes, they're all nodding and they're agreeing and they're smiling at us, and we are thinking, boy, we got something going here. And so we took advantage of it, and we kept talking and talking and talking. And they said, they voted that night, and they said, yes, we'll give you $800. Our feet did not touch the ground when we left that building. We floated out of there with the promise of $800 and our first big step. But before we left there, the man on my right said, what kind of a budget do you have? Well, there's just 2 of us, and we're paying for it out of our pockets, and so we have no money. We have, therefore, no budget. Well, he said to us, you better get a budget, because you got a good thing going here, and you need some money to do that. So we started thinking, what are we going to do? And we decided we're going to ask our community for money. The first thing that happened was the editor of the newspaper got word of us and wrote an incredible newspaper article in our local paper. And I think that's where Amy first heard of us too, was through that article. I was sitting home one day, and I was probably reading a book on sex trafficking, because we've read them all. We own most of them. And my phone rang. And a voice said, I'm looking for someone from the Lake County Sex Trafficking Task Force. I said, my name is Sue, and how can I help you? She said, well, I'd like to help out, because I understand you're looking for help. what can I do? So I started telling her what we were doing. This was in November. And I said, right now, we are fundraising, and we're going to the businesses in our community and talking to them about trafficking and what our plan is and what we're doing. And she said, well, I'm an old lady. I don't walk very well anymore, and I can't do that. But I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. Right now, I am writing you a check for $3,000.
Wow.
Hello, she said. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't talk.
First time ever.
And I hung up the phone, and I hung up the phone after we visited a little longer. She gave me her name and all of that, and got my address. And I called Marlis right away, and I said, I have news. And she said, are you sitting down? Are you okay? Because she thought somebody died.
Yeah.
And I said, we just got a $3,000 donation. And she said, are you sure it's for real? Don't think it was a scam. And I said, I don't know. The next morning, I went out and got my mail, and there was a $3,000 check. And that just put us on our way. So, what we do now is fundraise every November. Oh, I'm sorry.
And talk about the budget, we do have one.
We do have a budget. We do have a budget. And we tell everybody when we ask for money, we can stretch a $10 bill a long, long way. So if that's all you've got to give us, we'll take it. We're not shy about taking your money. But over the years, and it's been 6 years now, we have raised about $25,000, and we've spent most of it. And about $3,000 of that was in grants over time. But we still go door to door to businesses and organizations, and because Lake County is a big county and a lot of businesses are run out of homes, we also send letters. The best part of going door to door, it's not always just getting money in hand or a check or whatever. It's talking one-on-one about sex trafficking and how it affects our community. So that's why we do it. And we do it in November when it's cold, sometimes snowing, and that doesn't stop us. So that's how we get our funding, and our communities have been wonderful. We went late November, we walked into an auto repair shop in Finland, Minnesota, and the guy said, oh, I've been wondering where you guys are when you're coming in. He goes straight to his cash register, pulls out his checkbook, and writes a check for $150. He's been doing that every year almost since we started. He thinks nothing of it. He expected us to come. It was November, and we showed up. And so, it's kind of neat that way. So that's how we fund ourselves, and we're still work on it. And even throughout the year, we get checks from people that we've never heard of. People in the Twin Cities who have a cabin on the North Shore or somewhere. So now I'm going to turn this back to Marlis, because I've talked enough.
And we aren't going to hog the whole show, by the way. We are going to share some of this with the gentlemen.
We'll see.
Yeah. Anyhow, to get back to the support from law enforcement, when we set up meetings with the police chiefs in both Silver Bay and Two Harbors, and the county sheriff's office, which is in Two Harbors, very supportive. Right off the bat, wanted to talk to us about this issue. Were very willing for us to come in and have a meeting with them. The county sheriff shared a story of an individual who had been brought up from the cities for a weekend and then been dumped out on one of our county roads up there, and had after being used for the weekend, hadn't any way to find her way home. She just was dumped out in the country road someplace. And so he already had stories, and this was back in 2013, and of course you want to believe in an area where I grew up there that none of this horrible stuff is happening. It's just kind of it doesn't make you feel good to know it does go on, but it does, sadly. So we keep educating. But then in the police departments, we talked to individuals there, And so we've always had real direct support from our law enforcement, the county sheriff's office and individuals, and our police in each of the cities. So I'm going to turn this over to Ken, who's one of our very staunch representatives right from the get-go, and he was a part of our panel, and we'll get into talking about that too, one of the first presentations we made. So here you go, Ken.
It's yours.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to thank you guys for having us here. It was quite a drive, but it was a good drive, and we made it. So the second thing I'd like to do is just recognize all the work Sue and Marlis do for our community. I don't know where you all are from, but when we talk about community involvement and community policing, I really believe Two Harbors does a good job of engaging with the public so that we can be on the same side on many issues. And that's something that I'm super passionate about. And when Sue and Marlis came to the police department and they were not going to take no for an answer, we had a conversation. And they were just such strong advocates for this that I just really like to thank them for the work that they do. So it means a lot, and anything we can do as a law enforcement to support that is very important. One of the first conversations we had, I said, what is this about? You know, I have over 21 years in law enforcement. I've worked narcotics, I've worked investigations, I've done a lot of things. And when they brought up sex trafficking, yes, I knew about it, but I'm not holding this close enough. I knew quite a bit about sex trafficking, but man, two people that are so passionate about it, that read every little detail about it, could educate us quite a bit. So that was why, another reason we got engaged. And they spoke about awareness. That was the first word that really stuck in my head, and is the public aware? And if we're not aware, we can't do anything about it as a community. So that was a huge word. As we went further on, we got into education, in my opinion, and I don't think you can have enough education on any issue if you're passionate about it. They clearly have done that. And I think what happened over the last 6 years is it gave us in law enforcement a truly professional resource that we could come to and talk to them about sex trafficking. I might not have all the answers as a law enforcement officer or the assistant chief of police, but I sure know who I can go to that'll either get me with the right person to talk to, or they might even have the answer right away. So it's a good thing to bring into our community. And that awareness piece, we've had people come in and give us information. They might not want to be part of this bigger picture, but they definitely come into our office and communicate with us about what's going on in our community, clearly because of what Marlis and Sue have started. So from our point, we're just a support group. These two do the lion's share of the work, and we sure appreciate everything you guys do, so thank you.
Am I on next?
You are?
Oh, the Chronicle article. Yeah, you, Sue talked about the Chronicle article Tammy Francois did. Very, very nice. And of course, Tammy had a history in working with people of domestic violence and everything, so she could put her heart into that article. Well, in response to that article, besides the person calling and making the donation, we had a telephone call, email, I guess, from Sherry Schwartz, who worked with Nita Bells, who is an author out in the state of Oregon. And she has written the book, In Our Backyard. That's her book. And they contacted us because our article had popped up on their radar, and they wanted to know if they could work with us and do, collaborative work across. And we wanted to have them, have Nita Bells come and speak and be one of our guest speakers, but we didn't quite have enough money in our treasury to be able to afford to have her come. It's still in our future because she's still very involved in it, and she works against trafficking out there in the state of Oregon. So that generated that interest and more of a collaborative thing that way. And in our library, of course, we have an extensive personal library and more than one copy of Nita's book and several others. So we loan out those books so that people can read them and get educated on trafficking. And then when we were out talking, and out soliciting or having coffee or something in local restaurants in the Two Harbors, Lake County area. Of course, we're talking about trafficking, and we were talking to one of our county commissioners one time at Louise's in Two Harbors, and we knew the people in the room were eavesdropping. It got real quiet, and if it gets quiet in Louise's, you know they're listening. So anyway, when we were done, then the idea came up that since we can't talk to everybody in there, what we'll do now is leave these little cards on the tables in these restaurants we go to. So it gives key points on what to look for in a person that might be being trafficked is one card, and then recognizing the signs, and so that it's a little thing we'll leave on the table so people can pick it up. And then of course it has the contact number, the 888 number. So that generated out of that discussion with Pete when we met with him that day. So we try to educate in every fashion possible, and then this just jogged my memory. One of our she's in the Air Force, National Guard. She trains the National Guard folks on sexual harassment. It's an annual thing. And she wanted to be part of our panel or our task force and got in touch with us too. So she came up and made a presentation to us in another restaurant in the Two Harbors area about how she trains, what she trains in the military. Also, no talking in the room. Everybody was listening to her. So they all got educated on how the military trains on this. So it's all been, it's just all about continuing to keep it out there in the forefront and keep educating people and making them aware we're still working on this. So, okay, so now Sue will talk about our January events that we do.
Okay, since January is Trafficking Awareness Month, we do a couple of things. One thing we do is try to have a public program of some sort. Although now people, I think, are believing that they're all educated, and so attendance has been dropping off year by year. But the very first year we did that, we called it She's Somebody's Daughter. We had a panel. Ken was part of that panel, and I am so bummed because I have pictures of lots of things, and I cannot find the picture from that meeting, and I wanted to show you that Ken was really on that panel. And he's happy about that, I'm sure, that I couldn't find it.
We're okay with that.
Yeah. The next one we did was called Getting to the Roots of It. And we talked about a number of different things, and you probably recognize a few people there. On the one end is Nigel Perot, who was our regional navigator for a while, and on the opposite end is Michaela Snyder, and her dad, Grant Snyder, who did quite a bit of wowing our audiences. I'm telling you, I think we could have kept people there all night listening to those two. And then in the middle was a couple who are from UMD, University of Minnesota Duluth, and they put on quite a presentation as well that evening. It was really, really fun and really neat. We tried something different that year, and I think I may have another slide. Oops. Oh no, that's just at the crowd. We served pizza and salad, so people could come directly after work and kind of hang out and get acquainted. And we had professional childcare or licensed childcare. Thinking those would get more people there, and it did help a little bit. But it was kind of fun just to have time to visit with the people too. Then we did one. We had Chris Stark talk on pornography and rape culture. We brought the play Bottom. If any of you have ever seen that, I can't remember the name of the theater group, but they're from the Twin Cities, and they did their very last live performance in our school auditorium. And then we did one on community involvement and used the materials. Marlis is a certified, I guess, facilitator for the Green Dot program, and so we used that. But we've had some interesting programs, and what's really fascinating to me is how our community has changed its approach. When we first started, I was talking with two women who I see every time we have an election because we're all election judges. And I was telling them what we were doing. And they said, oh, that doesn't happen here. Or even if it does, it's none of our business. So the next time I saw them, well, they weren't quite as sure. And the next time, one of them said, my daughter's 13 and I'm scared to death for her because of what you guys have taught us. And she said, I see things going on. We've made some steps forward, I guess. And I get a little choked up when I think about that. The other thing, and my favorite event that we do in January, is a candlelight vigil. We usually do it the very first week of January. We have a little bit of a program. We've had speakers. We've had various things. We've had the group that comes to that always. It's always a different group. It's always a small group, but it's very intimate and very, very powerful to me. And we've had them share things. To start that out each year, though, we have the county proclamation, which Mr. Spey, Commissioner Spey in this case, always reads, and that's a very, very important part. And I must say, Rich has been extremely, extremely supportive since we first started working with the county, and really, really good. This is Philip Hummus. He is a musician extraordinaire, dancer, musician, harpist, composer, a high school student. He started out with us maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and he comes with his harp. He's now in college in the Twin Cities, but he's home on break in January, and he comes and backs up everything we do with harp music, which is really mood setting, you might say, and just he plays and just gives people time to think. So since we're talking about the proclamation and the support from the county, I'm going to turn this over to Rich Spey.
I like to say there's always a danger of giving an elected official a microphone. You might not get it back. No.
That's okay.
What Marlis and Sue didn't mention was the first candlelight vigil in January. Now remember this, northern Minnesota, and she decided she's going to have that on the steps of the courthouse. Well, we got there, and what was the temperature?
20 below.
20 below. Decided maybe we'll move it inside, and so it's been inside ever since. I'm going to stand from the way lines.
And to let them know the candles kept blowing out too.
Yeah, it's funny how that is, isn't it? So I usually when I talk, I like to start this off just to see if people know where we're at. So how many people have been to Gooseberry Falls in this room? Split Rock Lighthouse. Okay, I live right between the two, so now you know where my district is in Lake County. And as we said before, I'm a county commissioner. I was elected in 2008, and I've just completed my 10th year as a commissioner, and I've served as the board chair for the past 8 years. As most commissioners, we're on about 20 different committees or boards, along with our regular duties. And the ones that I'm on are mostly local, but I'm on a few state boards and also on some national boards. Many of my committees deal with land use or environment. And I've been appointed by the governor to the Board of Water and Soil Resources, and I also serve as the first vice president for the Association of Minnesota Counties. So that's just a little bit of a bio for me. So I got another exercise for you guys, and I'm speaking to a group that I don't normally speak to, so I'm expecting a good response here. So a show of hands, how many of you know who your U.S. senators are? Very good. How about your U.S. congressman? All right, it's getting harder. How about your state senator? Who's your state senator? You know your state senator, okay. How about your state representative? All right. How many of you know who your county commissioner is that represents your district? All right. And how about your city councilor or your township supervisor? Really good. This is a lot better than I expected because, well, I did expect great things from you guys. But many people don't know that. And I actually got asked in this room today, what does a county commissioner do? And I get that a lot. So one last question. Of all those elected officials that I talked about, who has engaged with those elected officials? All right, that's good too, because usually it's like two hands in the room. So you heard Marlis and Sue talk about their first engagement with the county board. And when they asked me if I would come here and talk to this panel, I got thinking, I go, well, what am I going to talk about? These are the experts. And the commissioner's not going to tell you what to do. So I got thinking more about that, and I thought it'd be better if I told you my point of view when someone in this room or someone of my constituents comes to talk to me. So, like with sex trafficking, if it's a bipartisan issue, it's much easier. And you find that more so in the legislature than you do locally. But that's one of the things you want to always keep in mind. And also to know that there are many requests made of elected officials on any variety of subjects. And it's almost like you're expected to be an expert of each one, and you're really an expert of none of them. So, when we get a request, kind of the term for that is an ask. And you really hear that out in DC when you're out there quite a bit, is what's your ask? What's your ask? So probably the most common is money. Money is a big ask. That's why I'm at these two. You got some money for us. And remember this, when you go to talk to an elected official, money is finite. There isn't a lot of it to go around. You hear billion-dollar budgets and things like that. That money mostly is allocated. So for $800, we pulled that $800 out of the commissioner's budget. And our commissioner's budget is for our travel, for our expenses, just those little nuances. But all that money has to be dedicated somewhere, and that was the little bit of money we had left at that time of year, and that's where we decided to put it. Another ask is policy. You guys want to make a policy change. As county officials, here's one that I've heard before. We want a policy written that county officials and county employees have to drive American cars. Okay? That makes sense to a lot of people. But is that a policy that we're going to put in place? And that debate comes in. Ordinances is another one. A real common one is I don't like trucks driving down my road jake braking. Noise. Or another ordinance change that we've had in front of us is e-cigarettes. We want to ban e-cigarettes in public places just like we do cigarettes. Another thing that you guys will probably be more so looking for is involvement from your public officials. And sometimes that can be really a big ask. Will you be a member of our organization? That's an ask. I've been asked that. And will you be a participant in a meeting? Will you get up in front of a big group and be part of a panel? Well, sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Asked to speak at meetings, but here's one that's kind of an interesting one, and I've had this request of me, is would you, Rich Spade, introduce me to so-and-so? And usually it goes up the chain. Will you introduce me to Amy Klobuchar? Or somebody of an agency? Tread carefully on that. A lot of times after you've had your discussions, an elected official will offer that, but you have to be very careful because those numbers aren't, they're like giving out your number. You want to be sure that that's where it's going to go. Another thing is at the legislative level is you've probably asked, you've probably been involved with asking for a bill to be written or signing on to a bill that's existing. try to understand that particular legislator's position before you make that ask. Because if they're totally on the opposite side, there might be a better way to come around to that person. You might also want to consider agencies. Who to talk to in an agency. An elected official can help you get to that right person. Somebody they've worked with, somebody that they trust, and somebody that's going to talk to them to help them author that bill, understand your passion. And talking about passion, remember this, that your passion might not necessarily be their passion, and seldom is. Also, your expertise is an asset to elected officials. So you're bringing something to the table. So when I get asked about sex trafficking and what blah, 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 I can rattle off a few things, but I say, here are the two ladies you need to talk to. And in turn, we have that relationship. There's a great demand on elected officials' time. I could have been in 2 different meetings today. Or I could have been doing my real job, and that is I'm a painting drywall contractor by trade. So I guess I'm going to kind of get to the end of this. Where to start? So these are just some suggestions. First, I would contact the office and ask who to speak with from the staff. You might get staff. Your first meeting might not be with any elected official. It might not be a city councilor, township supervisor, which I'd be surprised about the town, or a county commissioner. You might be talking to a staff person or a department head. Don't take that as a slight, because what I found, especially going in DC, if there's a big group and we have a senator or a representative in this crowd, I get my elevator speech. I've got 2 minutes at tops to talk to them. Now I go to their staffer that's right behind them, hand a card, say we need to talk about this issue and I'd like to educate you on it. And that's where you can get a lot of work done. You see I've got notes because I can't do anything without notes. I used to always have a speech in my pocket. Sue always likes that. And it was always written on folded, crumpled up paper with all kinds of scribbles on it. I don't know how to deal with this thing yet. So after you set up the appointment and you get into the meeting, be clear on what the issue is you want to discuss. And do not add other items on the fly. Oh, and by the way, now, Caroline, you had a big list up there of priorities you're going to vote for. Those are all ancillary to your main request. And that's part that you have to understand. If you came in and slapped down 12 things, it is not going to happen. Nothing's going to happen out of that 12 things because they don't know where your passion is. What's your priority in that? So be careful with that piece of it. One of the things I think about too is the beginnings of the safe harbor laws. Remember how that started? 16 and under trafficking. Now it's 18 and under. And then that gave way to our no wrong door. I mean, things were, moving in all directions, but all of it kind of came together. So my point being is, although you might have a huge list, work on the small pieces and the other pieces will start to fall in as you get the first ask taken care of. When you're done, provide a one-page handout. Make sure the staffers get it. If I go into, and I'll be DC next week, and I will have a bunch of talking points, a number of things I want to talk about, but I will leave a list of those bullet points. It'll be on one page, my letterhead, my signature, and that'll be left with them. They will now reach out to me, or I will follow up with them. And then further is, offer to be helpful to the legislator. Maybe they're going to do something with the bill. Are you willing to go and testify in front of that committee? That's really big. So now you're building that relationship. and then offer to supply any more information that they might not have. Please call me. I will follow up. We'll talk about it. Will my voice matter? This is a question I've gotten a few different times. Boy, I've got this little thing. And I think these two ladies said that right at the beginning. But here's one thing I use as an example, and you really don't have to say much more than Mothers Against Drunk Driving. Look what that organization did and where it is today. And that isn't that long ago. So that's what we are building here. So it's really big. One little thing can turn into a big thing. And disappointments. You're going to have some. Sometimes the answer is no. No, I don't have $800. I'm sorry, you don't have a budget. Get out there, get some money. They did both. So, and I'll give you just the last part of my list, and then I'll shut up. I'll even surrender the mic here. The don'ts, and don't threaten. And I've heard this before. I'm a taxpayer. You work for me. I pay your wage. I voted for you. Although those are probably all true, it's not going to help garner support if you're threatening. Do not, and this is my pet peeve, do not send a form letter with your signature on it. We recently, last year, a stack of 40 of these things came in, and it was the same letter with a different signature. I kept the top one, and threw the rest in the trash. Because I don't need 40 copies of the same message. But to that point, I did receive 20 from another group. It was the same message, but they handwritten their own response. They took their own time and they made words that were their own. And I kept all 20 of those. Do's. Do be respectful of their time. Elected officials are busy people, especially when you get beyond the county commissioner level. And their time, there's a group sitting right, if you've been in to meet with your representative, there's a group sitting right there to take your seat as soon as you walk out. So, kind of goes back to being succinct when you're in there. Do be polite and prompt. Do be succinct and brief in your presentation. And biggest do follow up with a written thank you, a handwritten thank you. They, especially at the state legislature, they get them on their chairs. The sergeant at arms will put it on their chairs, and it's like an honor. Hey, they like me, handwritten thank you. So, common sense. This is all common sense, people. You know it, instinctively know it, but I hope I helped reinforce that a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. Very nice. And yes, we also, part of this whole thing is we want you to know that it's not that difficult to go talk to your elected officials. Now, Ken said, we are two women. You don't say no to us very readily.
Doesn't go well.
We're like a couple of bulldogs. We get a hold of your calf on the back of your leg. We don't let go until you say yes in some fashion. But anyhow, to get going some more on our process for how we continue to educate and want to continue to educate about what trafficking is, and let people know that we are not giving up on this. We're going to continue to try to inform people so they know what signs to look for. But one of the things that happened in like 2016 is we have a local author up there, Dennis Hirschbach. He also taught school in the Two Harbors School, but he became an author when he retired, and he's written several books, but he wrote a book called A River Through Two Harbors, and it is about a victim who was murdered who had been trafficked, a native young woman from the Thunder Bay area. It's a novel. I mean, yes, I'm sure it's true, based on truth, but anyhow, he got in touch with us and wanted to collaborate when that book was coming out, the book release, and do a presentation at the same time and invite the public, and we did. And Christine Stark came, and the two of them were very informative and very educated the public, and we had a very good turnout for that event. And if you ever see his book. It's called A River Through Two Harbors, and it's very good. But that was another where someone approached us for collaboration work on this, so we continue in that process. Now Sue's going to talk to you about speaking engagements that we've done.
I just handed some bookmarks. One of our members at the time when Dennis Hirschbach contacted us said, what if we made a bookmark? And gave it to him. So he brought books that night, and I think he sold 75 that evening at that event, but we have since placed them in libraries. If we see the book River Through Two Harbors somewhere for sale, we often stick them in that book so that they get put out. Feel free if any of your organizations want to use something like that to do it. And same with these eavesdropper cards. It's kind of fun to leave them on tables here and there. We've done a lot of speaking engagements. We've been invited by small groups and organizations to come, particularly elderly organizations of senior citizens, golden age groups, that sort of thing. They want to know what they can do, so they ask us to come and speak. We've had some really fun times. We were speaking one time at a lunch meeting at a Chinese restaurant, and it was almost all women that were, I'm going to say, older than me for sure. And I'm not telling you how old I am, but I am a senior citizen, and there's no arguing that. We were at a Chinese restaurant, and you know, when people live on limited incomes, they clean their plates. You know how full those plates are at a Chinese restaurant. And I was standing at the front of the room after lunch speaking, and I noticed several places around the room, they had their full tummies, and they went to sleep on me. But that was okay, because the people that were still awake and listening had lots to say and lots of questions and things. A number of these engagements, we've spoken in Superior, Wisconsin, various places, Cook County, Carleton County, a number of different places. And they always invite a newspaper reporter from their local papers to come to their meetings. And as a result of those newspaper articles, we've received some really neat letters. Somebody from Green Bay, a woman who had a friend who wrote a book about trafficking in the southwestern part of the country, sent me the name of the book and thanked me. She wasn't at that meeting, but she read that newspaper article. Another woman from the Moose Lake area called me on the phone. We don't hesitate to give our phone numbers and our addresses out. I said, you know what, somebody told me a long time ago it was dangerous to do that. But I said, you know what, I've had a good long life. These kids that are caught up in this mess that we have, they deserve another chance, you know? So they can have my phone number. I want people to call. I got a call from a woman whose 30-some-year-old daughter had just gotten out of treatment, and was drug treatment, and was living with a guy who the grandma or the woman believed was trafficking her 16-year-old granddaughter. And she was very sure. And I said, have you talked to the law enforcement? Have you talked to them? Because they can help you. No, she said, I haven't. I haven't talked to them because my daughter's using drugs again. And she's going to be sent right back to treatment. And it's not doing her any good to keep going back and going back. But she said, I don't know what to do about my 16-year-old. I'm scared for her. And we talked for a long time. And I don't know if she ended up doing anything, but she needed to talk. And I was listening. I could hear what she was saying. I hope that I was able to help her. I'll never know, because she never called me back. But 5 minutes. Oh, we got to hustle. So anyway, the other things that we've done, we did some training with the local ambulance service. We used the Arizona State University module for EMS training, and I just heard recently from one of the people who was in that training that she still remembers everything we said. We went to the hospital and presented, look the other way, I think it's, or no, take another look or something like that. And they trained all of their people with that material. Marlis, it's back to you.
What am I?
Heritage Days.
Heritage Days. Oh, yes. Up in Two Harbors, if you come up there in July, what is it, the third weekend in July, we have Heritage Days. And so we set up a booth there. So we inform people, and lots of people stop at our booth and want to ask about what trafficking is and what it is and everything. And we share materials. And we share the booth usually with North Shore Horizons, our local domestic violence, sexual assault prevention organization. So we share the booth with them. And then North Shore Horizons gave us an Community Impact Award in 2015 for the work we were already doing, and we were only basically 2 years old at that time. So we really appreciated that recognition. Oh, there we are. Anyhow, then we did building bridges. We decided to organize two, it ended up being 2 sessions, but we called it Building Bridges between people from Lake County and Cook County. You know, we're sort of up there in the remote area, so we build our coalitions through both those counties. And so we held it in Beaver Bay, which is kind of in the middle, so people coming down from Cook County could attend, and our sessions were, we had panel discussions, we had table discussions and everything. And one thing we thought was very impressive, and not to put the crunch on you, but the Cook County commissioners changed their whole meeting date so they could all attend our session. That's how important the Cook County people, you know, they wanted to come down.
Man, they need more education up there.
Yeah. I don't want to put the pressure on. Anyhow, so those 2 sessions went very, very well, and we haven't done a lot of follow-up on it since, but we've talked about doing more of those kind of roundtable sessions. Now, Sue knows about equipment.
Well, we spent some of that money on equipment because we were using a flip chart the first time we did a presentation, and that was really awful because the woman that was helping me forgot to flip every time, and I was lost. So we bought a digital projector, we bought a screen, we bought a canopy for outdoor events, we bought a PA system. So that's where some of our money has gone. A lot of it has gone into advertising, things like that. A couple of years ago, we decided finally to apply for a 501c3 status, and we got that. And since then, we've been able to apply for some grants that were helpful. I'm just going to keep right on going there, since Amy's saying 4 minutes or something like that. Over the years, we've had members that have come and gone. There are still 2 of us, and a third one from that have been here for much of that time. Our 2018 focus is on End the Demand. And, oh, whoops, one too many. We stuck our necks out when we found out that this billboard was going to be available for 6 months, right on Highway 61, just outside of Two Harbors. And we said, okay, sign on the line, because we're going to find the money. And we put that together. It's still up. And we just got a notice this week that our contract is running out and the signboard is still available, and we have money. So we're thinking about going on for a little bit longer with that. Oh, and one other thing with End the Demand. You've probably all heard of the Don't Buy a program that's put out by Men as Peacemakers. I was a member of the pilot group that did that. We went through it for 1 year and worked on it, and I'll tell you, it was so good. So I highly recommend that when we're talking about ending the demand. And so, if you have any questions, you're welcome to come to us after the meeting or stick your hand in the air real quick.
We can take a couple of questions, and actually I'll start off because I have a question.
Okay.
First of all, thank you. This is such an excellent model of how anyone can really be engaged in their community. And so I just applaud your really excellent work. And of course, awareness and education are are very important, and particularly in communities, rural communities in Minnesota, where folks might not think it's even happening or an issue in their community. So that education piece, awareness piece, is really important. But we all know for prevention, we need to push that a little further. So my question for you, and Commissioner, thanks for that process. I think that's really important to know for folks that don't know how to really reach out to their like elected officials. So thanks for that. So I'm wondering if you, what your future plans are really more for upstream prevention. Are you thinking about some local ordinances that might help create a culture where people are not harmed to begin with, or even with businesses? I'm wondering if there have been any policy changes in businesses in the community, perhaps hotels or restaurants, anything along those lines. So has anything like that occurred, and/or is that something you're thinking about for the future?
You guys can join in on these if you have an answer to any part of.
Well, I was just thinking that I think a good one to engage would be the Lake County Chamber of Commerce. They have a name change, if you didn't know that, not two harbors anymore.
Yeah, it's called Lake County.
There you have all the businesses. Basically, all the businesses are there. So I think that would be a good one to try to get in front of them and have a short presentation.
Yes, and we are, when we realize that we've educated people on what trafficking is and what red flags to look for and things like that, and our attendance has gone down a little bit, so that's why we want to change up how we're educating it, and we came out with the end the demand thing. And we are going to have a retreat now in like 2 or 3 weeks to sit down and decide what are the next steps we need to do to keep this out in the front, that people don't think we've gone away someplace and are not working on this anymore. So yes, you segued in for us nicely. And so yes, we are going to do a retreat and develop a plan going forward, and that, we'll look at all those pieces, ordinances, working with the chamber, all the businesses. Whenever I had lunch with the Chamber of Commerce, I will tell you, because I'm part of the radio station. By the way, we did used to have a regular show on our community radio station on trafficking. We did that for a half-hour show once a month for a little over a year, till we ran out of guest speakers and, people, time and whatnot. So, but anyhow, whenever I had lunch with the Chamber of Commerce as a representative from the radio station, because we're a member, I always brought up about the trafficking. I know that businesses probably don't want to hear the bad things that might be going on in their community, and but I would always bring up about what we were doing work-wise with the trafficking task force. So they know about it, but we haven't officially met with them, so we can do that.
Anybody else got any ideas?
Just real quickly, I'll just touch on the fact that when we look at sex trafficking, I also think that many times that part of that is some of the narcotics can go with that. Someone becomes addicted, they start getting groomed, and that goes forward. As law enforcement, we all know that we have to change, we continue to change and evolve as law enforcement. As a community has different demands for us. But one of the things that we're doing in our department is just that education piece to our officers. The way I started policing 21 years ago is different than it is now. And fortunately, we have some young officers that are eager to learn. And I think that piece of, if you're trafficked or you're addicted to something, you're still a person. And that's something that our department tries to make sure that even if I arrest you, I have to treat you decently, right? And I think that piece of having compassion for people and hearing them out, just because they're addicted to something doesn't mean their story isn't true. And so I believe that we need to do a better job, and I think we truly have been trying on different pieces, but trying to make that difference of hearing people out as a person. Doesn't necessarily mean that whole thing's going to change, our decision on what we do. We still have to do our job, but it clearly gives us an alternative hypothesis to what may have happened. And so to your question directly, I think us educating law enforcement, so when those people do come to our office, we are better educated to hear them, listen to them, and more importantly, find the resources to take action to help them. So.
Well, thank you so much. Maybe I used up their time with my one question, unless there's one more burning question. Nope, they'll still be here for a few minutes. Thank you so much. Let's give them a